In the second month of our marriage, my mother-in-law said, "You should be paying all the bills here." I smiled and said, "Then I'll move back to the house I bought before we got married." My husband's face went pale, the spoon scraping against the pot. That sound. I want to start there, because that sound is the one that runs underneath this entire story. The slow, deliberate scrape of Norma's wooden spoon against the bottom of her soup pot every evening at 6 o'clock. The sound of a woman in complete command of a kitchen that was absolutely her kitchen. That had always been her kitchen. That would remain her kitchen regardless of what documents said or what arrangements had been discussed, or what promises had been made to the woman now living in the upstairs bedroom she had recently repainted in a color she had not chosen. It sounded like patience. It was not patience. I understood that by day 53, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The morning everything broke open, I came downstairs at 7 and found them at the kitchen table. Daniel with his coffee, Norma with hers, the two of them arranged in the specific configuration of people who have been waiting for someone and have agreed on what happens when she arrives. Daniel looked at me with the expression I had been watching him deploy for 7 weeks. The expression of a man who knows something is happening that he does not want to name directly, and who has decided that the best approach is to wait and see whether naming becomes unavoidable. It became unavoidable. "How much did you hear last night?" he asked. I looked at my husband of 53 days. "Enough," I said. "My name is Elena Vance. I am 34 years old. I work as a senior compliance analyst at a financial advisory firm in the city. The specific job that involves reading documents with the intention of finding the gap between what they appear to say and what they actually mean, between the stated purpose and the operative one, between the number on the page and the number that matters. I am very good at this. I was slower to apply it at home. This is a thing I have thought about extensively in the months since, and the honest answer is that the slowness was not stupidity. It was the specific blindness that comes from choosing to see what you want to see, which is not a cognitive failure but an emotional one, and one that I have given myself limited grace for because I should have known better, and also unlimited grace for because love is the oldest con, and I was not the first person it had worked on. I met Daniel Mercer at a professional conference in the spring. He was 36, a project manager for a regional infrastructure firm with the specific quality of attentiveness that I have since learned to categorize more carefully. The kind of attentiveness that is genuine in the early stages because it is also strategic, that looks like interest because interest is what it is, but that has an architecture underneath it that becomes visible only when you learn to look for architecture. He was charming, warm. He asked real questions and remembered the answers. He called when he said he would. He showed up in all the ways that demonstrate reliability when reliability is what you're trying to demonstrate. We dated for 14 months. We got engaged. We married in April. And in April, because his commute from my house was complicated and because the arrangement was temporary, just a few months, while we figured something permanent out, I moved into the house on Callaway Street that had been his father's and was now held in a family trust with his name and his mother's name on the deed. Norma Mercer. I want to tell you about Norma because Norma is the center of this story in a way that only became clear to me in retrospect. She is 61. She has lived in the Callaway Street house for 32 years, arrived as a young wife, stayed as a widow, and in the years since her husband's death had developed a relationship with the house that was total, in the way that only happens when a place becomes the primary expression of who you are. The furniture arrangement was hers. The pantry organization was hers. The dinner schedule, 6 o'clock, soup on Wednesdays, pasta on Fridays, the weekend meals more elaborate because weekends deserved it, was hers. In the first week, she seemed generous. She helped me make space for my things in the closet, showed me how the household systems ran, explained which shelf in the refrigerator was which and where the recycling went and what day the cleaning person came. She did all of this with the warm efficiency of someone welcoming a guest and explaining the house rules. It took me longer than it should have to recognize that this is how the household runs and this is how you will run are two sentences that had, in her delivery, become indistinguishable. My things were on one shelf, in one drawer, in one section of the closet, because that was the space that had been allocated, and the allocation had been made by someone else. And the fact that I was now this household's other adult female did not change who had made it. I am a compliance analyst. I notice structural things. I noticed this, and I told myself, temporary. A few months. Give it time. Week 5. The requests had been arriving since week 2, but week 5 was when they became direct. The utilities were higher with 3 people. Would I contribute to the gas bill? The groceries cost more when you were cooking for 3. The gutters needed replacing before the fall rains. The contractor had quoted $1,800, and it seemed fair to split it 3 ways. Each one sounded reasonable in isolation. Each one, stated alone, was the kind of thing a reasonable person contributes to when they are living in a shared household and want to be seen as a fair participant. That was the trap. It was designed to be evaluated in isolation. I am a compliance analyst. Isolation is not how I evaluate things. I started keeping a notebook on week 4 before the direct requests began because I had noticed that I was spending money in this household in ways that were accumulating in ways that I had not tracked. The notebook was small, the kind you buy at a drugstore, and I kept it in my work bag where it would not be found. Each expense on a separate line. Date, amount, stated purpose, who asked, whether I had been given time to consider, or whether the ask had arrived with an implicit urgency that made declining feel unreasonable. 7 weeks. I had contributed $4,340 $240 to the Callaway Street household. Daniel and Norma together had contributed $200 in the same period, primarily Daniel's share of the grocery runs. My name was not on the deed. I drove to the county recorder's office on a Thursday during my lunch break. I am a compliance analyst. I know how to pull a property record. I pulled it. Daniel Mercer, Norma Mercer, joint owners, held in the Edward Mercer Family Trust, established 2017 at the time of Edward Mercer's death. Standard transfer on death provisions, trust protections that would require specific legal procedures to modify. No other names, certainly not mine. I sat in my car in the parking structure across from the county recorder's office and looked at the document on my phone and thought about $4,340 over 7 weeks and about temporary, and about Norma's wooden spoon scraping the bottom of the soup pot every Wednesday evening at 6. Then I drove back to work and spent the afternoon reviewing disclosure documents for a client who had been surprised by a financial arrangement he hadn't read carefully enough. The irony was not subtle. The recording happened by accident, which is the part of this story that I find most clarifying in retrospect. Not the content of what I heard, which I had been suspecting in the way you suspect things you are hoping to be wrong about, but the fact that it was accidental. There was no plan. I had not set up surveillance. I had forgotten to stop a voice memo after a work call and had left my phone on the kitchen counter when I went upstairs to shower, and when I came back down and picked it up, the recording was still running. I stopped it. I looked at the timestamp. 41 minutes. I sat at the kitchen table and listened. The first 18 minutes were ambient. Kitchen sounds, the television in the background, the distant sound of the dishwasher completing its cycle. Then Daniel's voice, closer, as though he'd come into the kitchen. Then Norma's. She's been to the county recorder's office. A pause. Long enough that I held my breath. How do you know? Daniel. Margaret at the title company mentioned it. She recognized Elena's name. Another pause. She pulled the property record. What does that mean? It means she's looking. Norma's voice had the specific quality of someone recalibrating, not panicking, recalibrating. It means we need to move faster. The deed conversation has to happen this week, before she decides something we can't undo. I sat at the kitchen table with my headphones in and the recording playing and my hands flat on the table. Then Daniel said, if she adds me to the deed, we can refinance. Then Norma, exactly. Once the property is marital, everything becomes easier. Then Daniel, she trusts me. Then Norma laughing. Not meanly, the comfortable laugh of someone confirming a plan that has been working. Then use that. I listened to those 23 minutes 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it the first time, but because I am a compliance analyst, and understanding something once is not the same as having processed it completely, and this required complete processing. By the third listen, I understood the full architecture, not just the immediate plan. Get Elena to add Daniel to the deed of her own property, which would reclassify it as marital property, which would make it refinanceable and leverageable and potentially subject to division in any future legal proceeding. But the larger structure, the long financial play that had been running since before the wedding, possibly from before the engagement, in which my house, the house I owned outright, fully paid, renovated room by room over 6 years, with no mortgage and no partner on the deed, was the asset, and the marriage was the vehicle. Not love, asset acquisition. I sat at the kitchen table for 37 minutes after the third listen. Then I called a family law attorney. Catherine Holloway has been practicing family law in this state for 21 years. She was referred to me by a colleague who had used her during a difficult divorce and described her as the kind of attorney who reads everything and forgets nothing. I called her at 9:47 that evening and left a message describing the situation in 3 sentences. Compliance background, accidental recording, apparent coordinated plan to acquire marital interest in separate property. She called back at 8:14 the following morning. Play me the recording, she said. I played it over the phone, all 23 relevant minutes. When it ended, she was quiet for a moment. You said you work in financial compliance? She said. Yes. You understand what you're hearing? Yes, I said. That's why I'm calling you. Okay, she said. Here's what matters legally. Your house, when did you purchase it relative to the marriage? 3 years before the wedding. And he's never been on the deed? Never. Has he contributed financially to the property in any documented way? Renovations, mortgage payments, tax payments? No mortgage. The renovations were my money. He's lived there approximately 11 days during visits before we married. Then the house is separate property, Catherine said. Full stop. There is no legal mechanism by which marriage alone converts it to marital property. He would need you to add him to the deed, or he would need to contribute financially in a documented way that a court would recognize as creating an ownership interest, which is what they were planning to engineer. I said. Yes, she said. The recording indicates intent to use your trust to accomplish that, which is, it's not a crime in most jurisdictions unless they took specific legal steps, but it's relevant to divorce proceedings and to any claim he might make later. A pause. Elena, how long have you been married? 52 days, I said. She was quiet for a moment. I want you to do a few things today, she said. First, secure the recording. Multiple backups, different locations, cloud and physical. Second, don't sign anything at all. Don't be persuaded that a document is administrative or routine. Nothing. Third, call me after you've spoken to them because you're going to speak to them today. How do you know? I said. Because they know you've been to the county recorder's office, she said, and that changes their timeline. She was right. I want to tell you about my house because the house is the thing this entire story is about, and it deserves its own accounting. I bought it at 28. A 3-bedroom on Alderton Street. street, fully detached, on a corner lot with a garden that the previous owners had let go, and that I spent the first 2 years bringing back. Not because I am a gardener by nature, but because restoring something that has been neglected is satisfying in a way that is difficult to articulate, except to say that it is the opposite of compliance work, which is about finding what's wrong, and gardening is about making something right. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify is linked in the description. The renovations took 4 years, not because I was slow, but because I did them in the order I could afford. Kitchen first, then the 2 smaller bedrooms, then the main bathroom, then the primary bedroom last, when I had the budget for the things I actually wanted rather than the things I could manage. I paid cash for everything, or close to it, saved first, spent after. The house had no mortgage because I had put every dollar of my first 3 years at the firm into the deposit, and I had lived carefully while I built the equity. It is mine in the specific, complete way that things are yours when you built them with your own choices across years of specific daily decisions. Daniel had been in it 11 days. Visits, weekends, the long weekend we'd spent there when we got engaged. He had eaten at my kitchen table and slept in my bedroom and used my shower, and had, on one of those visits, stood in the main bedroom while I was doing something else and said, "This house is incredible, Elena." He had meant it genuinely. He had also meant something else. The morning after the recording, I came downstairs at 7. They were at the table. The arrangement I described at the beginning of this story, the waiting configuration, the decided on approach, the question Daniel asked when I reached the bottom of the stairs. "How much did you hear last night?" "Enough," I said. Norma said I was misunderstanding something. I asked her who owned the house, the Callaway Street house, the one I had been contributing to for 7 weeks. Neither of them answered, so I said what was true. "You wanted me paying for property I don't own," I said. "And when that wasn't producing results fast enough, the plan became getting me to sign over property I do own." "You're Daniel's wife," Norma said. "That means contributing to family." "I'll contribute to my own home," I said. I went upstairs. My suitcase was on the bed, half-packed, my clothes folded inside with the specific neatness of someone who had done this before and knew how to pack efficiently, my jewelry box in the outer pocket. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom and looked at the suitcase for a moment. Then I went to the nightstand, opened the drawer where I kept my passport. I am a compliance analyst who travels for work 4 times a year, and my passport lives in my nightstand drawer because that is where it has always lived and where I can always find it. The drawer was empty. I opened the other drawers, the closet, the shelf where I keep documents. Gone. Daniel appeared in the doorway. "Daniel," I said. He looked at the floor. He has a specific quality when he is doing something he knows is wrong, a tendency to study the floor, as though the floor contains information he needs more urgently than my face. I had found this quality charming once. I had thought it was humility. "We thought," he said, "if you moved out for a while, temporarily, you might be more open to putting your house in both our names before you came back, as a good faith gesture. And we thought if you had your passport, you might—" He stopped. "Might what?" I said. He looked at the floor harder. "Might go somewhere," he said, "instead of coming back." I looked at my husband. I thought about 14 months of dates, of calls that arrived when he said they would, of the question he had asked at a restaurant in the 8th month. "What would make you feel completely secure, Elena, financially? What does that look like for you?" And the answer I had given about the house, about the paid mortgage, about the satisfaction of something that was completely mine, he had filed that answer. I walked past him, down the stairs, through the kitchen where Norma's spoon was already in the pot for a Tuesday morning soup she had started before 7 o'clock, because some habits are more structural than others. Out the front door. I did not take the suitcase. Those clothes had been packed by their plan. I drove to Alderton Street. I parked in my driveway, unlocked my front door with my key, the key that was mine, on a chain I had chosen, for a house I had bought with my own money 6 years before I had met Daniel Mercer. I went inside. I stood in my kitchen for a while. My kitchen. The countertops I had chosen after 3 weeks of samples. The light fixture I had installed myself because the electrician's quote had seemed excessive, and I had watched enough tutorials to manage it. The garden visible through the window in October. The roses doing what roses do in October. I put the kettle on. I made tea. I sat at my own kitchen table. At some point I realized I was going to need to sleep. I went upstairs to my own bedroom, the one I had renovated last with the things I had saved for specifically. I got into my own bed. I did not wake up until morning. They arrived at 8:22 a.m. I know the time because I checked it when I heard the car in the driveway, and because I had been awake for 20 minutes already, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee, having confirmed 3 things: that Catherine Holloway's office opened at 9, that the recording was backed up in 4 separate locations, and that my passport had not been brought back to me, which meant Daniel still had it, which was going to be relevant. I went to the front door when they knocked. I opened it with the chain still in place. The door opened 6 inches. Through those 6 inches I could see Daniel, behind him Norma, and behind her the specific quality of a morning that has come to a person who did not expect to spend it in this driveway. "Can we come in?" Daniel asked. "No," I said. Norma stepped forward. "Elena, this is ridiculous. We need to talk like adults." "I'm open to talking," I said. "Here is fine." "Open the door," she said. "I'm not going to open the door," I said. "You have my passport. I'd like it back. We just needed—" "I know what you needed it for," I said. "I'd like it back today." Daniel said, "Elena, last night wasn't—" "I'm going to save us some time," I said. "I have the recording. 23 minutes. I've listened to it 3 times. I've shared it with my attorney. I understand exactly what was planned, and I understand exactly what the plan required from me." I looked at my husband through the 6-inch gap of my own front door. Do you want to tell me it wasn't what it sounded like? That's fine. I'm going to press play and we can evaluate it together. Neither of them spoke. I pressed play. Daniel's voice came out of my phone speaker into the October morning air of Alderton Street. If she adds me to the deed, we can refinance. Norma's. Exactly. Once the property is marital, everything becomes easier. Daniel's. She trusts me. Norma's laugh. Comfortable. Confirming. Then use that. When it ended, nobody spoke for a moment. Daniel swallowed. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said. I work in financial compliance. I understand exactly what that conversation describes. Norma said, "You're throwing away a marriage over a misunderstanding." I looked at her. At the woman who had oriented me to my role on week 1 and had been running the plan ever since, who had packed my suitcase with the plan's clothes and taken my passport to control the plan's timeline. At the woman whose laugh I had just played back to her through my front door at 8:30 in the morning. "I'm leaving," I said, because I finally stopped making excuses. Daniel's voice quieter. "What do you want, Elena?" "A divorce," I said. "Norma, we only wanted security." I nodded. "There it is," I said. Not love, not family, not the marriage they had described to me across 14 months of dinners and phone calls and a proposal at a restaurant where I had eaten well and trusted what I was being told. Security. Specifically, the security that my house, 3 bedrooms, fully paid, renovated room by room, would provide when the marriage converted it to marital property and the refinancing became possible and everything became easier. My passport, I said. By end of day. Catherine Holloway's office, 9:15 a.m. She is 53, with the specific quality of someone who has spent 21 years in a profession that requires knowing exactly where the lines are and whose lines they are. She reviewed the recording documentation I had provided, the property records I had pulled, the notebook I had kept, and the expense log covering 7 weeks of contributions to a house I did not own. "The passport," she said. "He has it," I said. She wrote something down. "That's going to be the first legal step. Passport retention without consent is not something we're going to leave unaddressed." She looked at me. "Do you have your driver's license?" "Yes, it was in my purse." "Other government ID? Birth certificate, social security card? Those are in my safe here." I had kept a fireproof safe at my own house, which Catherine noted without comment, but with the expression of someone who found this professionally reasonable. "Good," she said. "I'm going to send a demand letter for the passport today. I'm also going to document the recording and the property record pull as evidence of intent, which will be relevant to the divorce proceedings." A pause. "Elena, is there any documentation he could claim constitutes financial contribution to your property?" "No," I said. "The renovations predate him by 2 to 4 years. The utilities are in my name. He has never written a check toward this house. And the Callaway Street contributions. You have the notebook?" I handed it to her. She looked at it. At the 7 weeks of line items, dates, amounts, stated purposes, cumulative total. $4,340, she said. "Yes," I said. "In a house not on your deed." "Yes." She looked up. "We're going to include this in the filing. Contribution of funds to separate property of the other spouse, without reciprocal documentation or deed interest, is relevant to the equitable picture of the marriage." She paused. "He may not owe you the money back in a legal sense, but it establishes the pattern of what was being constructed here." I thought about the orientation. Week 1. Here is how the household runs. Here is your shelf. Here is your role. "How long do you think this takes?" I said. "The divorce itself depends on whether he contests. Given the recording, I don't anticipate aggressive opposition. They were caught with the plan documented. Contesting creates discovery, and discovery creates problems for the Callaway Street Trust if their conduct during this period is scrutinized." She looked at me steadily. "My guess is he'll want this resolved quietly and quickly." "What about the passport?" I said. "You'll have it back by end of week," she said. "If he doesn't return it voluntarily, we involve a magistrate, and that becomes a very different conversation for him." She was right about the timeline. The demand letter went out that afternoon from her office. The passport arrived at Catherine's office by courier at 3:47 p.m. the following day, in an envelope with no note. I picked it up the next morning, sat in Catherine's waiting room and held it. My name on the cover, my photograph inside, my document. Returned because someone had realized, somewhere in the previous 36 hours, that retaining it was no longer a leverage point. The divorce was filed on day 61 of the marriage. Daniel did not contest it. His attorney, a man named Gerald Park, 12 years in family law, who Catherine described to me as competent and currently quite uncomfortable with his client's position, made one inquiry about whether I would be willing to settle the Callaway Street contribution claims without formal proceedings. Catherine's response, which I approved, noted that the Callaway Street contribution was documented and would be included in any formal filing, and that if Gerald's client would like to avoid discovery into the trust structure and the conduct of the past 7 weeks, a clean and uncomplicated divorce was the fastest path to that outcome. They agreed to a clean and uncomplicated divorce. I received a settlement that included reimbursement of $4,340 in documented Callaway Street contributions. It was not a large amount. It was the accurate amount. My house remained in my name alone, unchanged, exactly as it had been before the marriage, exactly as it should have been throughout it. Norma Mercer made one attempt at contact, a letter, handwritten, 3 pages, which her attorney sent to Catherine as a personal communication. I read it once. The letter described the situation as a misunderstanding, described Daniel as a loving man who had made mistakes under his mother's influence, described herself as someone who had only wanted her son to be secure. I thought about the comfortable uncomfortable laugh. Then use that. I did not respond. 6 months later. The Alderton Street kitchen is mine. Entirely mine. In the way it has always been mine, and that feels different now than it did before. Not because it has changed, but because I have. The countertops are the same. The light fixture is the same. The garden is in April, which is when it is best. When the things that were dormant have decided to try again.